Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this wet and windy but lovely Tuesday morning. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us for continuing our adventure through the book of Psalms. Today we're in Psalm 10, and I mean Psalm 10. Let me remind you where that came from, because it's always good to give a bit of history occasionally. The original Hebrew Bible was in Hebrew, it's known by historians as the Masoretic text. But by the time of Jesus, most people didn't actually speak Hebrew. Most people were speaking Greek at the time. So about a couple of hundred years before Jesus came, someone did a translation of the Bible into Greek for people to read. And it's called the Septuagint. And it was pretty similar to the original Hebrew. It also had some books in called the Apocrypha, which we now know as the Apocrypha, extra text in which become known as Apocrypha. That's where the Apocrypha came from. And the Septuagint also had Psalm 9 and 10 lumped in together. And generally speaking, for historical reasons today, more Catholic translations of the Bible tend to follow the Septuagint, so they will have the Apocrypha in, and they will have Psalm 9 and 10 often put together, whereas more Protestant translations, generally speaking, stick with the original Hebrew, have 150 Psalms, and don't make sort of thing about the Apocrypha and so on. So for the record, I'm using the more Protestant translation, the New Revised Standard Version. I'm going with 150 Psalms rather than 149 and having Psalm 9 and 10 separately. But do be aware that many people think that 9 and 10 are one lumped in together. That's enough of the history for this morning. Straight into the text. Psalm 10. Here goes. Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In arrogance, the wicked persecute the poor. Let them be caught in the schemes they have devised. For the wicked boast of the desires of their heart. Those greedy for gain curse and renounce the Lord. In the pride of their countenance, the wicked say, God will not seek it out. All their thoughts are, there is no God. Their ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high, out of their sight. As for their foes, they scoff at them. They think in their heart, we shall not be moved. Throughout all generations, we shall not meet with adversity. Their mouths are filled with cursing and deceit and oppression. Under their tongues are mischief and iniquity. They sit in ambush in the villages. In hiding places, they murder the innocent. Their eyes stealthily watch for the helpless. They lurk in secret like a lion in its covert. They lurk that they may seize the poor. They seize the poor and drag them off into their net. They stoop, they crouch, and the helpless fall by their might. They think in their heart, God has forgotten. He's hidden his face. He will never see it. Rise up, O Lord. O God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the oppressed. Why do the wicked renounce God and say in their hearts, you will not call us to account? But do you see? Indeed, you note trouble and grief, that you may take it into your own hands. The helpless commit themselves to you. You have been the helper of the orphan. Break the arm of the wicked and the evildoers. Seek out their wickedness until you find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nation shall perish from his hand. O Lord, you will hear the desire of the meek. You will strengthen their hearts. You will incline your ear to do justice for the orphan and the oppressed, so that those from the earth may strike terror no more. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One of the sort of issues I have with church often is the language we sometimes use and the way we talk, and especially the things that we sing. You could be led to believe, you could be mistaken for thinking that life in the Christian life is one long spiritual experience. You know, God, I think you're wonderful. Lots of hymns sort of praised of God. We hear testimonies about, God said this, God said that, God said the other. And I feel wonderful about Jesus all the time, and so on and so on and so on. And one could be mistaken for thinking, if you listen to it, that life is one great big long permanent spiritual experience. Whereas you and I know that that isn't the case. Sure, sometimes God feels very close. Sometimes, however, God feels a long way away. Sometimes we can experience God's guiding hand on life very obviously, often with the better and benefit retrospect, and often we don't. Often we just go through life. Sometimes I get lots out of my morning prayers. Sometimes I just do it. And we forget actually that is life. Life is not one long, permanent, wacky spiritual experience. But I think the language that we use sometimes make it almost sound as though it is. We forget that actually, yeah, sure, Moses did meet God in the burning bush, but it took him 40 years before he did, and things like that. And the reason it's a problem is that if someone's having a hard time, if someone's having difficulties in their life or whatever, or somebody is struggling in their prayers, it can sometimes give them the impression that they may be doing something wrong, or God's given up on them, or something like that. Which is why I love the Psalms, because the Psalms are the Old Testament hymn book, and they are beautifully honest. And the reading in the Psalms, you're under no illusions about the fact that sure, God does sometimes feel very close, but God sometimes doesn't. That sometimes we can feel obviously God's justice and God's presence in the world, and sometimes that can be sometimes we know it in theory, but it can be difficult to hang on to sometimes, and sometimes we could despair, can't we? And this morning's Psalm, Psalm 10, kind of puts it really well. Psalm verse 1: "Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" And what I love about the Psalms, one of the many things I love about the Psalms, here is David being wonderfully honest. And I guess I want to make a plea for more honesty about this kind of thing. And David is so absolutely abundantly clear. Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself? When I need you, where are you? And David is wonderfully honest like that. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, he then goes on to talk about the wicked. Now, the wicked, the wicked is wicked here because he's acting with disregard to God, and he's acting he's either atheist or he is what you might call practical atheism. So one minute he's acting as if, in verse 4, as all his thoughts are, there is no God. But there's more to it than that as well. He says elsewhere, I don't have to worry because they think in their heart, God has forgotten, it says in verse 11. Or for a couple of verses down, verse 13, he says, you will not call us to account. So the wicked either doesn't believe in God, or he actually believes in God, but actually, it doesn't really matter because he's hidden himself and he's not going to hold us to account anyway, so we can do what we like. Basically, the point being, the wicked, they go on to misbehave, and the wicked misbehaves because there is no accountability. Because the wicked does not believe in God, the wicked knows that feels that they can do what they like because it doesn't matter, because God's forgotten and it doesn't matter and God doesn't notice. And even if there is a God, he ain't going to hold us to account anyway. You get the general idea, and that's how the wicked are. Without God in their lives, that's what they've got. Now, one of the things I loved about Queen Elizabeth was that however much people kowtowed to her, and they did, however much people would call her Your Majesty day in, day out, even her family presumably would cow, she was always the Queen, actually she knew that she served a God who's bigger than she was. And actually belief in God and having God, Almighty God in our lives, does give us a sense of accountability. It does actually show us that however big we may think we are, however clever we may think we are, and the wicked clearly does in this, actually we do have a God to whom we are accountable, for whom there is a judgment, for whom there is justice, and for who has not forgotten, who has not hidden his face, even though it might feel like it sometimes, God is still with us. So actually, here we have the wicked, who's wicked because he's either atheist or actually, in a sense, goes practical atheism because he thinks even if there is God, it doesn't matter anyway. So that's what King David's up against. Then he goes on then to do a prayer. I think it's verse 12 to 16. He goes on to talk about rise up, O God. He prays then to God. God, would you rise up and break the arm of the wicked? This God, this is going on. I'm asking you now. Raise up. It's a plea. Actually, it's quite a strong word. Rise up, O Lord. Lift your head. Don't forget the oppressed. Look what the wicked are doing. Come on, stand up. Come on, God, rouse yourself. Come and do something. Break the arm of the wicked and the evildoers, and break through their wickedness. God, can't you see what's going on? And Stevie then prays really strongly that God would do this. God would intervene. And then finally at the end, in the last couple of verses, it changes then from being not just a prayer, but a statement of faith. O Lord, you will hear the desire of the weak. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline their ear. So in the couple of verses from 13 through to 16, it's a prayer. It's a heartfelt prayer. God, raise up. Then at the end, it becomes a statement. It becomes a statement of faith. God, you will. I know you will. And it's interesting here that a statement of faith is It's not a statement, I believe in God the Father Almighty, as if there is a God. Actually, it's not just a prayer of intellectual assent. This is a prayer of a statement of a statement of faith. It's a statement of trust. You know, God, I know you will. There's not just a question of I believe that there is a God, the Father Almighty, and so on. It's actually a statement of faith that God will do something about it, that God will hear the desire of the wicked. So it's not just a faith that there is such a God, but it's actually a statement of faith that God is not just there, but he will sort it all out as well. So, 4 things in this morning's reading. Firstly, notice here David's amazing honesty, that he's honest with God. And I think we need to be more honest about our Christian lives and be honest that there's ups and there's downs as well. Secondly, it's a description of life, what life is like without God and what happens in society if there is no God, and if people act as if there is no God. Thirdly, David's heartfelt prayer, rise up, O God, can't you see what these people are doing to the poor, and so on. And finally, a statement of faith. I'm not just asking you to do it, but I know you will, which is a true statement